mic to walk around, and at any point any of you want to contribute to this, please do. I think you remember Jamie Power from Cadent, Rob Jayson from USIM. They are both veterans of this summit, so they know how all of this works. I wanted to start, both of you, just reflect a little bit. Are there one or two themes that popped for you in the discussions, both on and especially off stage, over the last couple of days?
Sure. It's not. Yeah, I think it's been great to hear from the variety of different presenters and discussions all about how, we moved. I think the great discussion was about, is programmatic the right thing to be calling it? What we're talking about is data-informed decision-making in the marketing sphere. And to me, I thought what was super interesting was how the focus on outcomes, right? So outcomes and how outcomes are beginning to evolve. We hear a lot about clients who've in-house programmatic, and their view on outcomes seems to be slightly different to what some of the agencies have been thinking about outcomes for. We're charged with performance, and performance for us typically means setting goals around CPA, CPC, click-through rates, those kind of set metrics that have always been in place, and those have bled through into programmatic. And when we listen to the clients talk, or when they've in-housed some of their programmatic, those outcomes are slightly different and a bit wider. How are we thinking about data-informed progress if we start with the outcomes that we need from different segments? I thought, listening to clients, like going back to the AAP, Advanced Auto Parts chap, Yogi, he was talking about the halo effects of, using AI to measure halo effects across different audiences and different parts, and how then to serve the right creative to the right people to cross-sell. Also, Jeremy said the same kind of thing on Dell. Those things are not typically the goals that are set up, the outcomes that we think about in the agency world, or that maybe some of the vendors are set up to start to answer. I think that focus has been very interesting in thinking about that.
So do you think that clients aren't communicating that they want to shift towards business outcomes, or do you think agency, why is that getting lost in translation?
It's tied a little bit to maybe first-party data, and it's tied a little bit to kind of ownership and understanding of the enterprise, right? So clients are in a much better place to understand the enterprise need of cross-sell of different departments and how to use data to inform those outcomes. And agencies and vendors don't sometimes get that lens. So how do we make sure that when the agency is involved, or when the vendor's going direct to the client, that you understand the true outcome and then set KPIs accordingly, and then you can kind of measure that stuff.
It also raises a really interesting question of transparency, because it turns the idea of transparency around back on the client. If the agency is going to be judged and paid according to outcomes, then the only fair way to do it is if they have greater insight into everything that the client is doing, because that's going to have as much impact on outcomes as the media buy.
Yeah, I would ask some of the clients out there, within the organization, does the media team within a client have the same goal as a brand holistically?
Right.
So is that why things are starting to get lost in translation?
Right.
I think it's really exciting to hear that everyone is using data, but I think one of the frustrations is that while data and technology create so much opportunity, because now we can seamlessly target audiences across all screens, whether it's digital, television, and in theory connect the dots and really do cross-channel attribution. But when you're seeing things like walled gardens pop up now in the television space, it's kind of frustrating because it's kind of like the perfect storm. We can now target auto intenders in TV, in digital, across all screens, track it back to mobile location data and web visitation and an actual purchase of a car, but we're not able to get clean attribution if people aren't willing to share data.
Right. And that nuance, so if we build a custom video network that talks to auto intenders, that's great, and that again, if we're able to do that, and then our goal is reach that group, which is a very legitimate target, that's good. But there's nuances, I suspect, within the client who sets that up to say, okay, beyond that, what are the other responses that we're looking for? How are we measuring success might well be something a little deeper than just that reach. And that may not be exposed, and there may be other elements that we could bring in. to make that, to judge success even better.
And then the other thing is, like, the creative model has to change a little bit. So now we have all this data to find audiences, and every time you talk about something like addressable television, you know, the first thing a CMO says is, this is great, I can identify an audience, let me speak to them in an appropriate way. But then they go back to the creative agency and they can't afford, you know, we have 5 audience segments that we're going after. It's going to be $5 million for 5 different spots. So then that makes it kind of impossible to really speak and cater the message the right way.
And are we seeing anything on the horizon that gives us faith that the creative is catching up? The data seems to have, the data and the technology have been so far ahead of the creative all along.
Yeah.
And on display, we can see some static display. We've seen some movement, but when we start talking about video and TV, are we really seeing paths to solve that technologically? Is it a tech fix?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, every CMO, every single time says, this is great, I'm going to do new creative, and then they end up executing in addressable TV the same spot that they're doing. I mean, addressable, it works.
50 times, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it works because it's it's just a means to apply frequency to a high-value audience, but the small percentage of brands that actually can pull off a custom creative, you see much higher lifts because you're able to find the audience and then connect with them in a more meaningful way.
But I think there is heart to do it. I mean, you had Josh here, who comes from a creative agency, who is a head of data, who is looking for ways to institute, the ways to apply data-informed solutions to the different segments they have to reach. So, I mean, clearly he's got they have, as BBDO, a strong aim to start to inform on this. The practical ways, I think you've got to figure out. You never want to get to a point where you've got some Frankenstein creative that's chopped and changed of different parts fitted together, but I think that's what their challenge is, and I think there's clearly heart to do it. I mean, he was talking very clearly about their attempts to set that up. It doesn't sound like they're quite there yet, but it's definitely, that's what they're working to.
It's a start.
Although we also keep hearing about how the initial shoot needs to change itself, with in mind that this is going to be parsed in a lot of different ways, that at the top end we need to start thinking creatively about the ways in which a message can be parsed in a lot of different ways, with simply a more sophisticated and varied kind of initial shoot, and even at conceptualization. How could this actually be parsed in different ways? I want to stop for a second before I get to the bigger programmatic question and see if anybody out here wants to chime in on a major theme that they think we should surface from the last couple of days that they've been hearing. Okay.
I think everyone's tired.
Okay. Then I will end this on my exit question is programmatic really the way we should be talking about this, naming it? And in terms of simply gathering together and talking about and sharing best practices, is that the best label here, or should we really be thinking about a different way of packaging and even programming an event on these topics?
I mean, I think it's clear it's all about the data and the audience. I think programmatic confuses people. Programmatic as it relates to television just never worked. So I think it's more about like data-driven applications to media versus programmatic.
And yes, I agree. And I just think maybe a way of tying back to outcomes, segment audiences to outcomes, data-informed audiences, data-informed outcomes within the media space is what we're trying to get to. I think what we're trying to get to.
Yeah.
And programmatic is a tactic. It's just automated buying and bidding, which is taking over everything. So if it takes over everything, it becomes a little more meaningless. So programmatic as a term, I'm not sure is as helpful as some of the the data side of the coin.
Yeah. I mean, we start out by asking the advertiser or the brand that we're working with, like, what do you want to achieve from the campaign? And then, what data do you have available? And then we kind of figure out, this is the KPI of the campaign, this is how we're going to measure it, and then here's either first, second, or third-party data that we're going to leverage. So it's like starting from what do you want to do, and then figuring out the right audience to activate against.
Let me pose it to all of you, the remaining hands. Who believes an event like this really should continue using the nomenclature data and programmatic inside of Summit? Why? Anybody want to chime in and tell me why is that term still important to you?
I think data gives validity to the programmatic part.
So it's applying data to the automation?
Yeah, I think that putting them together is a good mix.
Repeat that if you don't mind.
So I think data gives validity to the programmatic part, and I think that just for the outside sense. So in some ways, at our company, I telling people I'm going to the Data and Programmatic Summit. They all asked, "Oh, data and programmatic. Why are those two looped together?" And then it was a conversation about why data is so important to programmatic. That's a very specific example of why I like the title, but.
You guys in back, that whole table lit up.
Yeah. You guys got really excited.
Why is programmatic important to keep in the mix?
So Nick from Warner Media. I think from like the publisher standpoint, we've heard a lot about how everyone thinks that the way that they're buying should be kind of across the board, right, and get rid of the programmatic sense. But from an inventory standpoint, we're still looking to sell inventory in a broken out factor. So for us, like the data applies that way.
I think when you look at the audience and the attendees here, we have the what, which is the brand, the why is the data, and the how is the programmatic. Mm-hmm. So I think it sums it up nicely. Anecdotally, so if this was the data summit, Jamie, then Kamal would be here, and it would not be useful for him or for I like him too, but he would have not very much value to add to this conversation.
Yeah, I just think that like when you bring it to TV, programmatic gets a little confusing.
And if we just called it a programmatic summit, then we should be populating the stage with panels like bidding strategies.
Well,
Get down. I mean, a programmatic show would really be about the tactics themselves, since that's the how, right?
I would.
Sales summit, and I don't think that's what you want, nor is
Right.
that useful to this audience, right? This has been a very interesting and open dialogue. I think when you name it programmatic, then you have, it'd be great for you all because you can scale, but then I think the quality diminishes greatly.
I mean, even if you call it audience rather than programmatic, programmatic is to me is more tech stack. And I would say last year compared to this year, there was a lot more conversation last year about tech stack than there was this year, which I just think is informing what's happening in the marketplace, which is that, a lot more of this process is going in-house to clients, and clients are, well, obviously the tech stack is vitally important. That's not the focus. The focus is the outcome across the different segments that they want to buy.
Or from the brand side, as we heard 3-4 presentations on how you define and assemble an audience.
How do you reach an audience, how you connect with them, and then how do you measure it?
Right. So it could be audience-driven media summit. It could be a data-driven, advertising summit. Okay. And still, I guess programmatic is sort of it's presumed as the how, right? As Alan put out, I think I'm going to let you guys go to roundtables now and talk this through. Jamie, Rob, thank you very much.